We are the Itty Bitty Titty Tidbit Committee.
Eavesdroppin.
Hey, Michelle.
Geordie, hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
Well, I sound sexy, right?
Well, sexy. Not so sure.
Oh, come on.
You were trying to say a word recently on the phone. I heard you on the phone to your fiancé, and you were trying to say a word, but every time you said that word, it sounded like you were really upset. Like that. What was that word? What was that word?
I think I was trying to say love you or bye.
No, it was like,
something.
I'm fine.
I'm fine.
It's fine. Fine. Oh, listen, what are we going on about, Michelle? The listeners must be beside themselves wondering, what the hell? Well, should we tell them?
You're eavesdropping. That's what the hell.
This is a conversation, people.
It is a conversation. It's a convo.
We're allowing you to listen in. Aren't you lucky?
Yeah, you get to hear me sound like I'm recovering from a chest cold.
Which she is. But it doesn't stop her from chatting.
Nothing can stop me. Nothing can stop me.
There's no stopping her.
So welcome to Eavesdroppin. I'm Michelle. And
I'm Geordie.
Yes, you are.
Oh, she was
Geordie.
going to say, this is my friend Geordie. Oh,
I was going to say, and this is my little friend Geordie.
little? I think you'll find you're the little one round here.
And you are eavesdropping. Officially, you are called Eavesdroppers. Now, I'll just tell you some exciting things. First of all, for anyone who may have listened to last week's episode and heard Geordie talking about legends of rock and roll and the occult, well, she did say that I was talking about a film called Crossroads with Britney Spears.
Yes. What was that?
I mean, there is a film called Crossroads with Britney Spears.
She wasn't portraying a Delta blues singer who sold his soul to the devil.
No, it was a chick flick.
Oh.
No, 3 girls on a road trip. It's actually
Gotcha.
Shonda Rhimes.
Oh, schmaltzy.
Well, she did Grey's Anatomy. I liked Grey's Anatomy. She did Bridgerton, Inventing Anna. You know, she's kind of up there.
Shonda.
But there is actually a film called Crossroads. And it is actually about the Crossroads, sell your soul to the devil, Robert Johnson thing. It's a musical. And it's from the 80s.
Oh.
And it's got Ralph Macchio in it.
I thought you were going to say Michael Jackson. Don't know why he popped into my head. I guess because those 80s musicals, you just think of, what was it called again? The Wizard of Oz ripoff, The Wiz, with Diana Ross and Michael Jackson. They did a version.
I never saw that. Something maybe I can live without.
Yeah.
The other person in this movie was an 80s actress called Jamie Gertz. Do you remember her?
Yes, I do. She was in Lost Boys.
She was.
Yes.
the half vampire girlfriend.
That's right. I remember her because she looks like a couple of other actresses. And one of them is the lady who played Janice on Friends.
Who's Janice?
Chandler Bing's first girlfriend.
I don't remember her. She was also in that movie Less Than Zero with Robert Downey Jr.
With Robert Downey. I didn't see that.
She was in 16 Candles. She was in a load of 80s films.
Was she in 16? Okay.
Do you know what?
Jamie Gertz. Yes.
Well, she's now married to a multi-billionaire.
Multi-billionaire?
A multi-billionaire.
Wow, lucky Jamie.
But anyway, the upshot is there was a film called Crossroads. It wasn't the one with Britney. I have to say, full confession, I think I just threw it out there and I was quite thrilled to find that was
to find out that you were correct. Fantastic. So that's that. That was last week's episode. We talked about rock and roll and the occult. If you haven't heard it yet, just go back and listen because it was a bloody good listen, I reckon. If you're into music, if you're into things like Sonny and Cher and David Bowie, then you'll find some interesting witchy facts and spacey facts in there. I loved it.
I thought it was brilliant.
When I say facts. Anyway. Whenever we say facts, just bear in mind that that's very loose, that term very loose in this world.
We should come up with our own
encyclopedia of facts.
False and...
Oh, I see.
What could C be?
Compromising, outrageous. I don't know.
Yeah.
All the things we say are usually compromising and outrageous.
So false and compromising tidbits.
Speaking of our episode last week when you discussed Perry Farrell and Jane's addiction, did you end up tweeting him?
I have not yet. It's not an update because it is the update episode this week.
Is this? Oh, that's what we're giving you, listeners. It's the update episode.
It is the update episode. And look, I just want you to put a pin in this whole idea of Perry Farrell and Jane's addiction because I do have something for you a little later on.
Fantastic. Can I tell you something which is a bit of an update, Michelle? It's a bit of a sad update, actually.
Okay, shit. What?
Well, we were together at the weekend in your lovely place where you like to spend time in the Alps.
Yes.
That was nice. It is a bubble, everybody. Michelle does talk about living in a bubble. She bloody does. So you don't get any news. You don't know what's going on if you're not skiing or drinking or eating or walking. Life doesn't exist outside of those spheres, really. But what we missed, Michelle, on Saturday when we were having a right old knees up in a club, well, Barry Humphries passed away. That's Dame Edna Everage and Sir Les Patterson, a.k.a. They're his alter egos. Barry Humphries, he was 89, one of the most amazing comedians and drag acts. I suppose you could call him a drag act because Dame Edna was essentially a drag persona.
Was he really the first?
Not the first.
No, the first to have public acceptance and recognition as a man in a drag.
I would never say that because there are others, and particularly Danny LaRue. You've got to remember him. But he died on Saturday night, aged 89, after complications from a recent hip surgery, Michelle.
Oh,
and it's very sad. He's a wonderful... I mean, I think he was a bit controversial, some of the things that he said. I think his politics were a little controversial. I mean, he could get away with it when he was dressed up as Dame Edna Everage. She looked like my nana, I have to say. I had such an affiliation with Edna, and I did actually see the Dame Edna talk show live with my husband many years ago. We were in the audience while it was being filmed. The episode with who's the Baldwin that is in trouble at the moment?
Oh,
Alec.
Yes.
That guy. So that was an interesting show to be in the audience for. But the thing is, just before he passed away, he had been cancelled, Michelle.
Oh, what had he done?
I don't know if you know this, but he and another amazing comedian, Peter Cook, who sadly passed away a long time ago, Pete and Dud, they started the Melbourne International Comedy Festival in Barry Humphries' hometown of Melbourne many, many years ago in the 80s. And there was even an award that was handed out, kind of like the Perrier Award, for emerging new comedy talent, called the Barry Award. But that was scrapped recently because of some of the comedians complained about some comments that he had made, transphobic, basically, remarks. But now, because he's passed away and they want to acknowledge what he has contributed to, in actual fact, this comedy festival and comedy, they're trying to uncancel him. So I don't know how that's going to go. We'll see. Controversy.
I would love to know exactly what he said.
I know what he said, but I didn't want to repeat it.
Oh, so it was quite bad?
Well, it wasn't horrifically bad. It's just an old person's view of what gender... I think he called, changing your gender physically to be some kind of mutilation for a start. He said a few things which were kind of outrageous in this day and age.
Was he saying them as a comedian in one of his personas or as himself?
I'm not sure. I think it was as himself. But I mean, if it was Edna saying that, like I said, she could get away with anything. She's your nana. Nanas say shit.
And Les Patterson with his bad teeth and his beer spitting over everyone.
He is the epitome of bad taste, and that's his job.
Yes.
The cultural attaché.
Yeah.
That was his role. The cultural attaché to Australia, and it's his job to be upsetting. Amazing. Can I just add one more thing on while we're talking about cultural attachés and Australians behaving badly?
Yes.
I had a little message from one of our researchers this morning, very well timed, thank you, Al Taggart.
Okay.
Regarding our patron saint who doesn't get a lot of mentions these days. And I'm aware you've got things to tell me, Michelle, but I just want to tell you this because it kind of segues. It's Ben Mendlesohn.
Okay.
The actor Ben Mendelssohn, who we have lauded here on this podcast. I don't know if he's a listener, and if not, why not, Ben? For fuck's sake, get listening. because he was seen in London, and Al has said, I need to get searching for him, because he was just out and about in the streets the other day, Michelle, looking dishevelled. There was an article from news.com.au saying, oh, poor Ben. Aussie actor Ben Mendlesohn appears dishevelled on streets of London.
Now,
poor Ben.
it's funny you should say this because I have this story for you. The news about Bendels has been pretty thin on the ground for quite some time. But I did discover this exact thing you're talking about.
Did you see the pictures?
Oh, yes. He was papped on Regent Street looking...
Was that where
it
he
was? On Regent Street looking crazy. I love him. He was in this pinstripe blazer with
and a T-shirt.
I'm not joking. He's got a bit of a brown lemonade belly. He did not look good in this T-shirt.
He was on the brown lemonades, I believe, on this occasion. Some afternoon drinking then, unless it was the morning.
He looked as rough as fucking dog balls, I tell you. But the T-shirt said, no excuses. It was my fault. And he had this teeny tiny little blue...
little straw hat.
Panama style hat on, yeah. It looked like he was sort of trying to go incognito. But you know what London paparazzi is like.
Well, I wouldn't have known. I would have just avoided that man like the plague if I'd seen him on the street. Apparently he was trying to direct the bicycles, and then he stopped and chatted.
Well...
He had runny nose.
Well, that's it. That's his video of him strutting down Regent Street.
Strutting?
Yeah, right down Oxford Circus. It's kind of hilarious. He's then walking into the middle of a footpath, starts directing pedestrians.
The bikes and pedestrians. God love him.
There is snot running out of his nose.
He had a cold.
He stopped outside the L'Occitane store on Regent Street, pulls out a ciggy and starts giving traffic signals to people walking past. Then you see pictures of him signing autographs, he's chatting with fans, he's laughing it up. And there's this kind of crowd forming around him all the time, fucking boogs streaming out.
Would you have told him?
Yes, I would have said, Ben, you need a tissue or wipe it on your sleeve, mate.
I would have given him a tissue.
But you know what? I saw the snot. I saw it. There is a picture.
It was thick and juicy, yes.
Super runny, dripping into his mouth. There's this one photo where it's dripping into his mouth and he doesn't even care. He's just smiling away.
I love him. Actually, I do feel like I'm related to him, I have to say.
Honestly, I didn't realise Al had come across this. Thank you, Al. Honestly, I thought this story is going to be as juicy as what's coming out of his nose for you. It was pretty crazy. But you know what? There is a website which, honestly, I think they are slightly obsessed with Ben. It's called MediaMass.net. They've got all this shit about Ben Mendelssohn, and I don't think any of it's true.
Is this where you get your info? Do you remember you said that he was having a baby, then you changed your mind?
Yes, that's right. Well, I think people just are raking up nothing, because this article said that he's in the running to be named Time Magazine's Person of the Year 2023.
Oh. Do you think his agent said to him, Ben, come to London. We need to get you out there. People just can't get access to you. You've got one post on your bloody Instagram page. I know because I follow him. And you need to be more accessible to fans in order to win more awards and things. Because you're in the running to be Person of the Year, Ben. Come on, step up. So he said, okay. And had a couple of drinks, hit the town. Is this what you mean? He's ringing them up. I did what you said. I'm in the papers.
Well, the thing is, Geordie, Al did come up with this term, Baywit.
He was a bit Baywittish that day, wasn't he?
There was a picture of Ben. You know how you do this thing where you go, and your shoulders go up, and he's got that face. Yeah, there is a picture of him doing that face, and it just cracked me up.
Poor Ben.
Maybe his press agent said, got to get some eyes on you, Ben. Get out there.
He did it the best way he knows how. God love him.
Also on this same website, they said Ben secretly got married. They don't say to who.
Lucky lady.
In the next article say that he's secretly homosexual.
What?
They also say he's considering retiring this year.
Oh.
But they also say he's in line to be the next James Bond.
Oh, for God's sake. He's not tall enough.
No, and they say his dog had surgery.
Oh, that's interesting.
people are a bit Ben crazy right now. But honestly, nothing was crazier than the bugs hanging out of his nose in that picture. So,
Baywit, it's a baywit. No shirt and thongs, what a ding-dong. Baywit, it's a baywit. Big gut hanging out, giddy, 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 gat. Oh, I don't even know, yes. What the fuck?
I was hoping to have something a little juicier than Ben's nose for you this week. Because as anyone who knows, since the early days of this podcast, and maybe actually even from the start of 2021, we've been obsessed with a missing Australian fraudster called Melissa Caddick and her severed foot. Now, obviously, we haven't talked about her for quite some time because...
No, we haven't.
Well, the case hasn't really been in the news that much lately.
And I'd love to know what's going on, Michelle. Have you been proven right? Is she still alive? Did she actually just cut off her foot to evade fraud investigators?
Well, yes.
Or, no. Or is she actually, did she just befall a terrible accident, maybe at the hands of biker gangs, which is my take.
That is your theory. And look, I think there could be some legs that might have wheels.
But it won't have feet.
It's all about to kick off with Melissa Caddick, yes, because the inquest into her death officially, as of April 27, is supposedly officially over. And the findings of the inquest into her disappearance and, I'm doing air quotes here, suspected death, they are due to be handed down on April 27. Thing is, we've passed April 27. I've scoured the internet. I think there's a media embargo on this shit until they get their ducks in a row because there is nothing. I'm just going to do a quick recap for anyone who maybe missed our Melissa Caddick deep dives or who is a new eavesdropper. So on November 12 in 2020, 49-year-old financial investor Melissa Caddick went missing. And look, on the surface of it, it just seemed like a pretty kind of tragic situation where a woman had potentially fallen off the cliffs at Dover Heights, which is on the eastern coast of Sydney near Bondi. But turns out Melissa Caddick, she was a financial fraudster. She'd been running a dodgy Ponzi scheme. She hadn't just been, conning clients. She conned all her friends and family out of massive amounts of cash. We're talking like 23 million plus Aussie dollars.
Terrible.
Yeah. And the day before she went missing, she'd been raided by the Australian Federal Police and the Australian Securities Commission, who'd been investigating her for months. Since she vanished, there have been loads of theories about what's happened to her, which obviously were all ramped up 3 months later when her foot washed up inside a snazzy trainer on Boonda Beach 400k away from Sydney. And the whole world, except for me, jumped to the conclusion that she was dead.
Right.
Look, there is so much to unpack with this case. So please go back and listen, guys, if you have any interest in it.
Do you know which episode is the first time you mentioned it?
Absolutely not. But I will link to the episode in the show notes. But look, just to wrap up, as I mentioned, the inquest into the case has supposedly been wrapped up. And it's been going on since September last year. And look, it did reveal a tiny little sliver of new information about the foot.
Because you'd spoken to a surgeon even, hadn't you? You'd spoken to somebody.
Yes, I went and spoke to a surgeon about how the severing of that foot, could you still survive if you had cut it off yourself? Would a clean break like that indicate that it had been ripped off? Eaten by a shark? Was it severed, deliberately cut off?
Was it a clean break, though? Because wasn't it just bits and pieces left in the trainer? It wasn't the whole foot.
It was the whole foot.
It was matter.
Well, look, it was her whole foot, but it had been in that warm bacteria. I mean, we know what Australian waters are like. They're full of
wee-wees.
I was going to say...
Shark wee-wee?
No.
All right.
No, little bacteria and insects and things that all want to kill you. I mean...
You mean like sea lice?
Sea lice and just loads of weird stuff in our waters that only occur when you have hot tropical waters. In colder waters, these things can't survive. But in Australian waters, because it's nice and warm, things thrive. Bacteria thrives. So during this inquest, a forensic pathologist did reveal that Melissa's severed foot actually did have several fractures when it was found. And this is new information. No one has mentioned this before. However, the pathologist then did go on to say that those fractures were not a lethal injury. Unpacking that, I'm not sure if what they're saying is that the foot was fractured before or after it was separated from her body.
Yeah, I think she fell.
And the foot just fell off? Or
she was pushed. Yeah, I think that it was probably chomped off, no?
Well, I wonder if this is going to come out in the inquest.
Or was she captured by bikers and then tortured?
I think she went to a surgeon and asked for it to be chopped off. This is my theory.
Fuck's sake.
I think without knowing how that foot was severed, whether it was, like you say, chomped off, cut off, if it had been ripped off, if it was God knows what. But what I think they're basically saying is that the fractures they did find on that foot were not going to kill her. Make of that what you will. Although, as you know, I think she's living it up with a new face and one foot on a beach in the middle of nowhere. You know, this inquest has been going on for almost 7 months. During this inquest, they have focused on a few key things, including the police investigation, the actions of her husband, Anthony Coletti, and why he had so much time and delay in reporting her disappearance. Because he took his sweet time to tell the police she was missing, more than 24 hours. And those hours are crucial.
Yes.
And the inquest apparently has looked really hard at the scientific evidence about the foot and the ocean currents and what all the level of bacteria and whatever that they found on the foot and what it all means. So even though these findings haven't come out, and I think they will in the next few days, at this stage, apparently, Anthony Coletti is not accused of any wrongdoing in relation to either her dodgy Ponzi dealings or her death.
Okay.
And another thing that the court was looking into was that in the initial stages of the investigation, the police had 2 theories about Melissa, that she'd either gone into hiding to avoid being thrown into jail or she killed herself. And what did come up during this inquest is that homicide squad was not brought in during the first week of the investigation into her disappearance because, according to New South Wales Police standard operating procedure, the homicide squad must be told about a case if they think it could be murder or if there are any suspicious circumstances. And this is full of suspicious circumstances.
Sure. Well, why didn't they let them know then? If it was so suspicious from the off, why didn't they involve the homicide squad immediately?
Well, the head of missing persons is a guy called Inspector Brown. He has been hauled over the coals for this. And he's come back to this inquest saying the wording of what he thought he was meant to do in the operations manual was unclear. And because he thought that there was no murder in this case, he never got homicide involved. So he's kind of trying to get off the hook by saying, it was really unclear wording, didn't know what to do. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think the information has been embargoed right now because it should have come out today or yesterday in the press. So watch this space for updates.
Okay, watch and listen.
Yep.
Eavesdropping.
Why are you crying?
Drop it.
I know this next little titty bitty is not an update.
But I do love your titty bitties, your itty bitty titties.
We are the itty bitty titty tit-bit committee. What I was looking for was an update on Calvine because we know that it's been in the media lately.
Yes.
You know, I was hoping that the guy from, who actually took those photos.
Kevin.
Yes.
Calvin. No, what's his name?
Kevin from
Calvine.
Yes. Hopefully he may have come forward saying, yes, it was me. No such thing.
But he's made up, so it's not going to happen.
I saw the picture of him from the 80s.
Right.
He's
okay.
Or the 90s. He's real. He's as real as Neil.
Okay.
I did come across something else which I thought I just have to share because I just thought, as if the Ukraine does not have enough on its plate right now.
Yeah.
They think a UFO crashed there recently.
But they also thought that at the beginning of the war.
Yes.
Do you remember we covered that another time?
Yes, we did. This new one happened on the 19th of April this year.
Go, what?
So apparently a massive white light shot through the sky over Kyiv and no one knows what the fuck it was. and it was intense. And apparently in 4 separate pieces of footage, you can see this light suddenly ripping through the sky before a flaming object crashes to the ground. And it triggered an air raid alert. And all of this happened around 10 o'clock at night. And a guy called Sergei Popko, who is the Kyiv City military administration guy, he said it's an unknown aerial object.
Okay.
Now, he said it was most likely a possible entry into the Earth's atmosphere of a large space body from any World Aerospace Agency.
Huh?
Now, basically, I think what that means is they have no clue who sent whatever the fuck it was into, like, Kyiv airspace. Although he later says, after verification and clarification, the information regarding the probable use of enemy aircraft or an airstrike with missile weapons was not confirmed. But it was not a missile attack. And then he says, our anti-aircraft defense did not use available weapons. So they were not on high alert that they were being attacked.
There was no incoming, unless it's a new experimental weapon. Or is it a falling satellite? But it just seems to be very coincidental that it should land there. Hot spot in a war zone.
Exactly. Following morning, not a single trace of whatever crashed into the ground was found. And this was confirmed by a guy called Yuri Inat, who is a spokesperson for Air Force Command of the Armed Forces in Ukraine. And they initially thought it was NASA and a NASA satellite.
That's what I'd have thought.
Well, NASA were meant to be pulling a particular satellite out of action that day. But NASA has denied it was them. So that's them off the list.
Maybe they fucked up and they didn't want to own up.
Well, who knows? Because we know that they don't come clean about this shit. And it could be years and redacted files, and maybe even then we won't know the truth.
Never know.
But the whole thing blew up on Twitter. There were loads of people tweeting saying it was a UFO, including the Austrian ambassador in Kyiv. So that's where we are with this. Not anyone, not even NASA, knows what flashed and crashed and burned that night. And if they do know, they're not letting on. And then my last little itty-bitty shitty-bitty. Going back to what you shit in the stick. Going back to what you talked about with Jane's addiction, with Harry Farrell. Like I said, we did talk about him a couple of weeks ago and his spiritual exchange with an angel. And I did want to tweet him, but I need to find that password.
Because he's answering questions on Twitter as we speak about his spiritual encounters.
I want to connect with him on this spirity stuff. I did go looking to see if he'd had any more tweets to anyone. What I did come across instead was something about Dave Navarro.
The guitarist.
The guitarist from Jane's Addiction.
Jane's Addiction and Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yes.
And he was the guy that was standing there with his top off, ready to go on stage when we were backstage at Reading that time.
Oh, my God. Hot.
But you didn't seem to see him.
Well, I don't know.
He was right there next to us.
I'd had some drinks. I'd had a lot of drinks that day. So I think I kind of knew this, but forgot. So I thought I would take a very, very quick look at the murder of Dave Navarro's mother.
Oh, I didn't know she was murdered.
Constance Colleen Hopkins. Yeah, like you said, Dave Navarro, guitarist in Jane's Addiction, Red Hot Chili Peppers. He was also married to Carmen Electra, and he's been a host and a judge on a tattoo TV show called Ink Master since 2012. But anyway, when Dave was 7 years old, I think around 74, 75, his parents Connie and his dad James Raul Navarro, they split. They divorced. And Connie was gorgeous. She's blonde, a former model. The dad was this handsome Mexican guy. And after the divorce, Dave split his time between his parents, bouncing back and forth between them in LA. Thing is, in 1983, Connie had been dating a muscle dude, a bodybuilder called John Riccardi. But she broke it off with him, and by all accounts, he had a really hard time accepting that the relationship was over. In fact, I read that he'd been stalking her for a few months after the breakup.
That's not sexy.
Really unsexy. He was also a muscle guy, also not sexy. I don't like those kind of guns.
Not for me.
No, keep the guns.
You like it the opposite, don't you?
I like a little skinny mini too.
Oh, I thought you liked it a little bit more like of a flesh covering, but with a bit more kind of like marshmallow consistency. You have said in the past. James Gandolfini.
There's something sexy about that dude. And he ain't got a single muscle. I mean, he is dead now. But anyway, moving right along.
Wow.
What? I like him skinny. I like a big guy. If you're nice, I like you. That's the main thing.
That's not true.
What? We're going to have to unpack that another time. So back to Dave Navarro, who I think he is quite handsome, actually.
Not for me, but I see it.
He's got that Johnny Depp look about him.
He's definitely very flashy looking, isn't he?
He is. He's covered in tats. So his mum broken up with this like muscle guy. He'd been stalking her.
Yeah.
I also read, and this is in February of 1983, he'd broken into Connie's condo. So that's quite a mouthful. He didn't find Connie there. Instead, he found Dave there. Handcuffed Dave.
Baby Dave.
Handcuffed baby Dave at gunpoint.
That's horrifying.
Dude's 15. He's 15 at this point.
Oh, I thought he was 5. Sorry.
I mean, he's still baby-faced Dave, but no, he's not baby Dave. I thought you meant baby Dave as in, hey, baby. Anyway, thing is, Dave never reported it to the police, neither did the mum.
Oh, that's terrifying for poor Dave.
I mean, look, maybe they didn't want to aggravate this guy.
Yeah.
It's the 80s. Maybe he was jacked up on steroids. I don't know.
Oh, God.
On the night of March 3rd, 1983, like I said, Dave was 15. He was meant to be staying with his mum for the night, but at the last minute he changed his mind and decided he was going to go stay with his dad instead, I think in Santa Monica. So Connie asked her friend, Sue Jory, to come over and stay the night with her, who Dave actually calls his aunt. I don't know if that's like a friend or, you know, an auntie, like one of those fake aunties. She came round that night to stay with Connie in the flat, which was a terrible move because later that night, Connie's ex, John Riccardi, once again broke into Connie's West LA condo.
Yes.
This time he did not handcuff Connie. Instead, he shot both her and her friend Sue. Yeah. And
that's awful.
And police later found Connie, who was 41 at this stage. They found her body stuffed inside a linen closet.
Oh, my God.
So the thing is, John Riccardi then spent the next 8 years on the run before he was finally arrested in Houston.
How many?
8 years.
That's too many years.
8 fucking years.
They knew who it was.
Yeah, on the run. But remember, this is the 80s and police systems are not joined up. Definitely not between states. He's gone to Houston from California. They did an America's Most Wanted on him.
On this guy, right.
Yep. And he was found because of it after some tip-offs from the public. I'm not sure about this, but I think actually Dave Navarro went on and talked about, like, please help me find my mum.
No, help me find the killer of my mum.
Sorry, help me find the killer of my mum.
Yeah.
And this is 91, so Jane's Addiction were not massive at this point, and he was nowhere near being in the Chili Peppers. So at this point, I don't think he's famous. They tracked this guy down, John Riccardi.
That was the year they blew up.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
You're more of a fan than I am.
I only liked a few of their songs. Some of them were not that great. They tracked down this guy, brought him in for questioning, and he admitted that, yes, he and Connie were on bad terms after the split, but he denied killing her.
What? What about Dave would have divulged by now that he'd been handcuffed and held at gunpoint as a teenager.
Exactly. But look, the court was having none of this, and they called bullshit on it because in 1994 he was convicted of the murders of both Connie and poor old Sue, who just happened to be wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah.
He was put on death row. Thing is, the California Supreme Court overturned this death row sentence in 2012 because there apparently had been a fuck up with the juror selection process at the time, back in the 90s. But thankfully, John Riccardi was not released. His prison sentence was just changed to life without parole, which means this guy is never getting out of jail.
Never getting out, hopefully.
No.
What a monster.
Absolute fucking monster. And there is a documentary that Dave Navarro did about all of this, and it's called Morning Sun, as in morning, MOURNING, and SON. So a little bit of a play on words. And full disclosure, I've not watched it. I tried to find this documentary, but I did watch the trailer. And the thing is, it was really, really intense watching this because we talk a lot about murder on this podcast.
Yeah.
I just think that we sometimes just talk about it in a really detached way.
Yes, of course.
we don't talk about it with the idea of like real people and their families. And, you know, we look at it at basically the facts of a case in a really detached way. And what really struck me watching the trailer was it looks really harrowing. You know, the effects of this really touched, obviously, Dave Navarro. It fucked up his whole life.
Yes.
And we observe these things from a distance of time and space. But this poor guy had his whole life, his whole world destroyed. And, you know, and he spiraled into heroin to kind of numb the fucked upness of it all. Although he did say he was already into drugs by this stage when his mum was murdered, 15. Like, that's quite intense.
He's an LA kid, though.
Exactly. He's an LA kid, you know, obviously into rock and roll. So I think this documentary goes a lot into his own personal journey into the trauma. And apparently there is a scene where he gets into a limo and goes to confront his mum's killer in prison.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And because of prison policy, they don't let him record it.
But he had his moment?
He had his moment, but it wasn't what he thought it was going to be. He thought he was going to be really angry. Apparently it was just really awkward, and he came out of it just saying he's just like an old dude dying in jail. So I really want to see this documentary.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, like I said, it's called Morning Sun. I'll link to the trailer. And if anyone can find a link to this, let me know, because I'd love to see it. So it wasn't an update on Perry and the tweets, but there's a little titty-bitty for you about Dave Navarro.
Amazing. Thank you, Michelle. Oh, rack off your dag. Piss off. No, I can furry.
Get fucked.
See you next Tuesday.
You big black dog up, yeah.
So what you just said about us talking about murder and the victims of murder and the facts established of murders that are out there in the public domain has always bothered me when we talk about this stuff on this podcast. Obviously, there are people whose lives have been taken in usually horrible ways, and then there are the lives of the people left behind as well. So my update today is focused, first of all, on a recent story that we did. It was actually the very first episode of January this year, and it was my reporting of something that had just happened the day that I got to Australia for Christmas, the Wyambula massacre.
Right.
Which happened, like I said, in December 2023. 22, sorry. And you can find that series 4, episode 3. So it wasn't the first episode, sorry, it was the third. It is, just to recap you, the story of Nathaniel and Gareth Train, brothers who were raised in happy clappy style ministries. Their father was a bit dodgy, maybe, let's just call it, because he was kicked out of the church and then started his own church. And whilst at the church, they met Stacey, who is now Stacey Train, and she was married originally to Nathaniel, one of the brothers, but then swip-swapped and went over to Gareth. And these three people were in a rural property in Queensland, in a place called Wyambula, when there was a siege where people were murdered, like I said, in December 2022. 2 police officers from Queensland and a neighbour were all murdered before all 3 perpetrators were shot and killed by police after a long standoff.
It's quite shocking.
So there aren't many updates, because what you see is what you get with this case, really. There was a lot of questioning over whether or not the inquiry should be focusing on the fact that this was a terrorist organisation. But I don't know what they came up with regards to that, because I found this fascinating story with Nathaniel and Stacey's daughter. They've got 2 grown-up children, and Madeline Train is the daughter of Nathaniel and Stacey and stepdaughter of Uncle Gareth, which is weird enough sentence in itself. So she said that the 3 of these people, who she considered to be her parents, all 3, were so far into the conspiracy theories that she had routinely muted all notifications on her phone from them. Madeline remembers that Nathaniel and Stacey, her birth parents, parted ways when she was around 3 years old, and then her mother started a relationship with Nathaniel's brother, Uncle Gareth, as I like to keep calling him, just because it makes it sound so weird. Madeline claims that this swapperoo was amicable, but mostly it was for her sake and her younger brother's sake, just to keep, the kids happy.
Yeah.
She also said that the three had become estranged from their own families because they believed they had been exposed to a paedophile while they were children.
What?
The three adults in this situation, raised in a religious environment, felt that they had been exposed to a paedophile as children. That was their backstory. And I don't know more than that. But that's why they were keeping it amicable for the children's sake. And they always listened to everything that any child ever told them. They always took them seriously. As you remember, if you listen to the episode, both Stacey and Nathaniel were quite high up in the Australian education departments as head teachers and whatnot, like principals, they call it there, in primary schools.
Yep.
So there are no official reports or evidence about this paedophile interaction with them. But Madeleine does believe that it was this trauma from their childhood that led to their descent into conspiracy and mistrust of authority. Despite standing by their religion, they remained incredibly religious all the way through. Madeleine was mostly raised by Gareth, who is her stepfather and uncle, and Stacey, but sometimes she spent time with Nathaniel, who's her birth father, before she attended boarding school. Now, Gareth, the uncle, was a stay-at-home dad, and he's the older brother of the two, and I think the driving force behind all of this. Madeleine remembers he would apply for jobs but not get them, which Madeleine feels that was maybe contributing to the spiral into online conspiracy theories that he
had too much time on his hands.
He had too much time, exactly. So he's sitting there devouring sensational YouTube videos and the like. And once the kids left home and the pandemic hit, he had even more time to indulge in this, and it became a full-time habit. So like I said, they still maintained their religious beliefs, which had primed them for their belief in the apocalypse and end-of-world scenarios.
Yeah.
So they were also against vaccinations as well. And this was a narrative brewing amongst a lot of people, especially in Australia. There was some very strong, and still is, strong reaction to government mandates because they came down quite hard. And if people are going to force you to do something that is your right, it's your body, then fair enough that people are going to react. But these guys in particular took it even further because of their indoctrinations, I suppose. Soon, all three of Madeleine's parent figures had gone down that rabbit hole, and due to the inundation of doomy messages that she was getting on her phone, ping, 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 she asked them, please, can you just write to me?
Yeah.
Because she couldn't handle the calls and she had to mute them. Like I said, it was just too distressing. She says, they would call me randomly just to talk about weird shit, and I felt like I can't do this. You need to send me an email so that I can access it on my own time.
Yeah.
I hated it. I would mute all the notifications because I rarely got a text. I get excited. It was them. And then it wasn't nice.
No. I mean, that's the kind of family WhatsApp group you just put on mute. you know, it's too much.
You can't leave.
No, you can't leave.
Because it makes you look like you've thrown your mic down.
Yeah, no, but you just get rid of that.
Exactly. So Madeleine believes that all three of her parents should have received mental health treatment, and after the shooting, she herself has suffered with her own mental health, and she's advocating for an increased understanding of how trauma can impact people's lives.
It's not surprising, what she endured was fucked up.
Absolutely. So that poor woman has to live with the knowledge that her parents were responsible for the taking of three innocent people's lives, and now her mental health, like I said, has suffered. But she said that the judgment for her parents, all three of them, is reserved for God.
Oh, so she's quite religious. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Eavesdroppin'. You always hark back to Melissa Caddick. I tend to hark back to Keith Raniere, who is our favourite cult leader from NXIVM, the sex cult, the Hollywood sex cult.
He is the cult leader that just keeps on giving,
He keeps giving.
He does.
I've got some interesting information here, actually, but it's not that recent. The most recent info I've got is from January this year. It's from the Daily Mail. Ooh. And I just want to preempt this by saying that in Season 4, Episode 1, this was the first episode of the year. I followed up from a deep dive in Season 1 where Michelle and I both watched the documentary called The Vow, which is about this sex cult NXIVM, which was run by sex-mad short-ass Keith Raniere and his business partner, Nancy Saltzman. He's tiny.
He is teeny tiny.
And it was interesting for people because it involved actor Alison Mack from Smallville, and it was the daughter of, what's her name from
Dynasty
Falcon
or something.
Crest.
Yeah, well, Catherine
Yeah.
Oxenberg's daughter.
Catherine Oxenberg's daughter, India, was involved. A lot of people, fell for
Yeah.
this. And then it all went to shit.
And they were smart people seeking some kind of spiritual guidance, actually.
The Vow followed that part of the story up until the arrest of Keith Raniere and his cronies. But then the Vow Series 2 follows Nancy Saltzman, who was strangely missing from the first documentary. And you felt that she was just as bad and as guilty as Keith Raniere. But in my story, it kind of follows her in a run-up into the trial with her little ankle bracelet on, watching her experience regret and shame, while at the same time discovering that there are still people who, to our horror, support Keith Raniere and think he's still the bee's knees.
And also, if I'm not mistaken, there was a little bit of, empathy for what Nancy Salzman went through, because she was kind of a victim in many ways too. She was brainwashed.
She discovered she'd been gaslit by him. She discovered that he allowed one of his girlfriends to die in a horrible way, and she was almost connected to that because she was an ex-nurse and she was helping, but she was being held back from helping in time because he wanted his breakfast and he wanted this, that. He was like, no, make her wait, before she realised when she got there that this woman had spent an entire night in a wet, soiled bed in her last days, her last hours of life with cancer. Horrific. Then she discovered to her horror that one of her daughters had been in a relationship with Keith Raniere where she'd been promised a child and it never came to fruition because she was constantly being punished. And she was one of the main people who started this vow part of DOS, it was called, part of the cult, where they secretly enlisted women, had them branded with Keith's initials, and had them act out degrading acts and tell degrading stories about themselves to use against them as way of
collateral.
What's that?
Against
Collateral.
them. Yeah, it's fucked up.
All this is fact. Bear that in mind. Pin that. So in this update, in the article I found, little Keith Raniere is due to be moved to a violent, highly segregated prison to live out the rest of his 120-year sentence. If you remember from my episode, he was actually in Arizona jail where he was able to still communicate with his followers from outside, doing torch signals and things. So meanwhile, with him about to be moved, his legal team are attempting to block the transfer over fears he'll be killed inside because Michelle, 62-year-old Raniere, who could be transferred to one of the Federal Bureau's management units, which is known as Guantanamo North. Okay. This is where some of the USA's most violent offenders and terrorists and extremists are living out their days. And his convictions, Raniere's convictions from 2019 on charges of sex trafficking, forced labor, conspiracy, wire fraud conspiracy, and racketeering charges with underlying acts that included possession of child pornography, extortion, and identity theft. Because remember, he stole people's documents. He was in relationships with girls under age, and there's filmed evidence of that. Ended up with him in jail in, like I said, Arizona. And in 2022, in September, he was actually the victim of a vicious attack from another inmate where he was knocked unconscious by another sex trafficking criminal who was inside. And then Keith was moved to a segregated windowless cell for 23 hours of a day for about 196 days next to, and I don't know why this is included in the information, this is released by his attorneys, an intersex inmate in a cage smeared in human shit, which was apparently extremely unpleasant for him.
Yeah, but it's next to him. It's not his cell.
No.
And the thing is, I think they've kind of got it right, that they're lumping Keith Raniere in with some of the most dangerous criminals in America because, okay, so, I mean, his crimes are pretty fucked up, but, he's not a serial killer. He's not any of that. He is a fucking dangerous master manipulator. And that, I think, is incredibly powerful and dangerous for people. He should be locked up.
Because he's still working his magic from behind bars.
On people from, just with a flashlight, he's still working his magic.
Yeah.
Like, he's got fucking something that turns people.
Absolutely. So his legal team are beside themselves because even though Raniere's attacker is no longer at the prison, he remained in that isolation cell until his team stepped in and got a judge to order the prison to provide an explanation as to why he was kept there for so long. It wasn't for his own safety, basically. So he's expected to be moved to either Indiana or Illinois, and I think that's probably happened, but I couldn't find the information, in a prison designed to completely isolate prisoners from other inmates and the outside world. The inmates there have all communications with the outside world monitored, which I think is a good thing for him.
Yes.
Like we just said, to protect the safety and security of the community.
Yep.
But Keith Raniere has a power of attorney, a man called Sunil Chakravorty, and he believes that the transfer plans are retaliatory since Keith is trying to challenge his conviction on the grounds that the FBI allegedly tampered with evidence in this case. And that's worrying, Michelle.
Fucking hell.
Because his legal team, power of attorney Chakravorty, believes Raniere was silenced and says that there have been 7 computer experts, forensic experts, including 4 former FBI examiners, willing to testify about clear evidence of the FBI's wrongdoing. Raniere is also putting his foot down from within. He doesn't want to move. He's launching all sorts of claims, but really it's up to the Bureau of Prisons to determine whether he will be transferred to a low or medium security facility, which is what he wants. His legal team are working on the belief that evidence against him, which the prosecution said was the bare bones and the absolute damning evidence of the trial, that this evidence was manipulated, planted, and tampered with while in FBI custody. His attorneys claim that his wrongful treatment include him being banned from communicating with close friends and his power of attorney, and this is all in retaliation for exposing the alleged government wrongdoing.
Now, look, I really struggle with that because, first of all,
if it's true, that's terrible.
If it's true, but I struggle with thinking it's true because, as we know from The Vow, Season 1, this guy was such a narcissist that he recorded every single moment of his life.
Yes,
and
he did.
He basically incarcerated himself. Like
he really did.
Everything that he did wrong was documented, either visually with videos or tapes. So I find it really hard to believe that.
That's not to mention the actual witness statements in court.
Yep.
A lot of those underage girls ended up standing up and saying what had happened to them, being imprisoned, although the door was never locked, things like that. That's the power he had.
Yeah.
He was able to imprison an underage girl, for almost a year, I think it was. There was no locks on the door.
Yeah.
She could have gone at any time. It didn't occur to her.
Well, she was so mentally fucking broken that she never even tried to get out. Look, I can't speak to whether or not there was wrongdoing in the way that the case was handled, because as we've just seen with Dave Navarro's mum, all those years later, he's off death row because there was a fuck up with the jury selection process. Shit like this happens. It does happen.
There's always a way.
Yeah,
there is always a way. So this 120-year sentence could easily be completely overturned, and all of the other people who have gone down, like the Seagram's heiress Claire Bronfman, who basically bankrolled the whole organisation, could also come out. And also people like Nancy Saltzman, who's probably she's happy to take her punishment, and her daughter, both happy to take their punishments because they realised they were in the wrong and they have regretted what they were a part of now that they've seen the light. But at the end of The Vow too, there was a civil rights lawsuit being brought against the Arizona jail where he was being kept, and they believe that they have a chance of overturning the conviction, because there was evidence, they believe, of investigators planting evidence, which was shown by them going straight to his desk and looking under the desk, bypassing loads of other places when they went to gather the evidence. And that was basically the Canon digital camera and camera card that they found. And with that, the investigators said there are only 2 pieces of digital evidence the government used to prove the child pornography and child exploitation. It was this camera and camera card. But their team said that he was being framed because the metadata on one of the photos shows it was manipulated in Adobe Photoshop, and that the camera wasn't made until 2004, but the photo timestamps were from 2003. But like I said, I don't believe that he's photoshopped every single fucking one of those pictures, or they have. And I also don't think they can manipulate the testimony, which was so similar across the line of all these young women and girls.
This is horrifying because if they have fucked up in procedure and this guy gets back out into the community, all of them
will be released.
Oh my God. They are dangerous. They are dangerous people who are clever and crazy. Their minds they're not right.
No, I also think that it's very clear from the film that I've seen of Raniere, not just people's interpretations of him, they're his own films, like Michelle said. there has been a lot of document. He liked everything documented because he loved himself. That's why he had a house full of women that were all taking turns sleeping with him. And that's why he had houses elsewhere with young girls incarcerated to be his sex slaves and took all their virginities.
Yep.
He loved himself. He's a narcissist. He doesn't believe that he's in the wrong because that is the fatal flaw of a narcissist. They can't see it in themselves. There is no hope for redemption. He will never change his ways.
I just hope that if, for some reason, it manages to escalate to the point where he could actually be released, that there will be some other kind of case brought against him, because guys like that, they're too dangerous. They're too dangerous to be released into the community.
It must be very worrying for the victims who feel that they've had their day in court, that they've won, that they have, been justified, their ill treatment, their years that they've given him, some of them their child-rearing years that they've given to Keith Raniere and had nothing for it. I wonder how they're feeling right now. Probably not very good.
And probably a bit scared.
Quite frightened. Yeah.
It's interesting because when I was telling you about the Dave Navarro story, and on the trailer, he says this guy got away with it for 8 years.
Yeah.
8 years he was on the loose. And in those 8 years, the anger and rage that he felt inside of him, but also scared. Is he going to come after him?
Yeah.
I don't think that you can put a measure of what that does to a person, the not knowing. And for these girls to even have, who helped to put Keith Raniere behind bars, for them to feel like, I went through all of that potentially for nothing. I think we have no clue how that fucks with a person.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Amazing update, but really scary, Geordie. Really scary.
Scary stuff. Well, I apologise, listeners, for leaving it on such a dark note.
We've had some darkness in this episode.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Whenever you're feeling a little bit dark and you want to lighten the mood, just have a little think about Ben Mendlesohn. He's guaranteed to brighten anyone's day. I wish he'd directed me on my electric human forest bike.
Oh, my God. Do you know what, though? I am going to put a link because I have to say I was shocked and couldn't stop laughing when I saw this happy, weird Ben Mendlesohn. And he's got a dough face. This doughy face with this snot just flipping into his mouth. Oh, it was intense. So I will link to the story with all the photos.
Please enjoy.
And look, I think, Geordie, on that note, there's only really one thing left to say.
And that thing is, wherever you are,
whatever you do,
just keep
eavesdropping.
Eavesdropping, eavesdropping, dropping, eavesdropping, dropping, eavesdropping, eavesdropping, dropping, dropping,